In today's episode, I'm joined by parenting coach Caroline Rowett to talk about one of the biggest challenges parents face, staying calm when they're triggered. We also dive into how to build real confidence in our kids, the right way to praise, and why connection matters more than perfection. Hi, so I'm joined with Caroline Rowett today. You're a parenting coach, so thank you for joining me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
I wanted to start today. I put out a post on Instagram recently about what were some of the big challenges people found with parenting. And it really surprised me to see that about 80% of the poll came back that people really struggled with self-regulation and calming themselves. So I wanted to dive right into that to start with the fact that I feel a lot of parents know what we should be doing, but it's actually doing it in the moment. So what's your advice as parents, how we can stay regulated to be able to help our children with their behaviour?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely key. And I think there's an easy answer and there's a more complicated answer. Right. And I think the easy answer is to actually give yourself a bit of a toolbox. You know, what are the things that help you just take that frustration and anger or whatever you're feeling down a notch? And that might be taking a big, deep breath. It might be just looking out the window and watching the leaves for a moment. It might be putting that kettle on when you feel that frustration rising and really listening to the kettle boiling and focusing in on the sound. So those kind of things can be your go-to tools. And I think parents probably, when they stop and think about it for a moment, they will know what they have in their toolbox, because there's lots of moments in life, you know, when you're cut off in the traffic, you can't ram the car in front of you. When you're in a meeting and tensions rise, you can't lose it. You have to keep control. So there are lots of situations where as parents we manage to keep control, but we're maybe not taking those tools into our parenting. So I think it's thinking about those. Yeah. What are those pause buttons that we can hit when we feel that frustration rising? And at what moment do we need to hit those? So we'll notice when things are feeling a little bit out of control and we can hit those pause buttons, take ourselves down. We're not going to take ourselves all the way back to Zen often, but we can take ourselves down that one step on the ladder, which can be helpful. And then the more complicated answer is we don't parent in isolation. So we parent with the ghosts of our past, how we were parented. We parent with the expectations of society. We parent with our own expectations. And we need to understand all of that and really be able to know what we're thinking in the moment, because there's lots of stresses in life. And so your child asks for an ice cream and you have a meltdown about it, right? And all they've done is ask for an ice cream, but you're perhaps stressed about finances, you don't have the money for the ice cream, you have all these thoughts about how you wish you could buy them what you wanted, but you don't, and they keep asking for things that you can't give them. And so we react to that. And if we can reflect a bit on what caused that reaction and understand ourselves a little bit better, a little bit more deeply, and give ourselves some grace to sort that stuff out.
I think you're right. I think it's rare that we ever get angry necessarily about the isolated moment, do we? There's usually a lot of contributing factors as to whether you're hungry, whether you're tired, whether you've had an argument with your partner. You know, if it's actually the 10th time they've asked for that ice cream when they had 3 the day before. It's those contributing things, that drip effect, that sometimes cause us to lose our temper. And it's really challenging in the moment when there's so many things going on. And often for me, I find as a parent, like overstimulation, I think is a big thing. You know, I've got 3 children, and the fact that they're often all talking at once. There's a lot of noise. They might be screaming at the same time. The baby's kept me up. My husband's trying to get me to focus on something that's really important whilst the other one needs the toilet for the 3rd time. And the 3rd one is upset that, you know, his biscuit broke. And in the moment, it's really hard to stay calm and think about what matters, because you just feel like snapping, because there's just too much going on and too much overstimulation. So I think you're right about trying to recognise actually sometimes where it's coming from and maybe trying to manage the environment and a bit of self-care along the way sometimes.
Absolutely.
I think goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Self-care goes a hugely long way.
Yeah.
And as I said, giving yourself the grace to know that you're not always going to hit those pause buttons. You are going to be overstimulated sometimes, as you say. And it's okay to look after yourself. Giving yourself permission to step back sometimes and not be that parent that you think you ought to be, but actually being the parent that you need to be as well.
Yeah, so true. So true. Lovely. So I wanted to talk to you about praise today and why praise is so important with our children. I think that's one that we think we've all got covered, right? Well done. Good job. Love your picture. But talk me through what descriptive praise means and why we should be praising our children in a certain way, really, for a more optimum outcome.
Yeah, well, how we speak to our children becomes their inner voice, doesn't it? So what we say about the things that they do matters. And things like, well done, good job, are okay. There's nothing wrong with saying it, but they're a bit generic. And I think we can do better if we give it a bit of thought. So I think descriptive praise is really noticing what they've done and commenting on that. So instead of good job, you can say, oh, you were trying really hard to colour within the lines and you've done that brilliantly. So just taking that extra time to notice and describe what you see and what you like. But the other thing that I think is really important is to actually notice the characteristics or the qualities that your child possesses that enable them to do that thing. So do they have determination? Do they have perseverance? Are they kind? And those things, if they believe them about themselves, it empowers them to do so much more. If we praise a picture and we say, that's a lovely picture, tell me about it, and they tell you all about it, and that's a lovely conversation. But if you then say, I just love how creative you are, it just goes that extra bit to help them to be creative, not just in that picture making episode, but in writing a story at school and in finding a solution to a problem that they have. And it gives them that self-belief that they have something that they can use in whatever situation they're in. Yeah. So I think that piece is also important as well as the descriptive praise.
I love that. You're so right. It's about giving them that inner belief, isn't it, that we can't take away from them. Because I guess sometimes the fear with the good girl, good boy is, on the other hand, if they do something wrong and they think they're not a good boy or not a good girl, it negates what they might have done well previously. Whereas when we use that descriptive praise, they're really banking those experiences, aren't they, of where they feel that they did something correct in a certain way, that you kind of can't take that back from them. And that's what attributes to the self-confidence and self-esteem, doesn't it? I love that. When our kids mess up, say whether it's lying or hitting or failing, how do you recommend that we best respond to them then?
Yeah, well, I think accepting that children are going to behave in ways that we don't like, and that is not because they're trying to be naughty. It's because something's going on for them in that moment. And so I think, I think trying not to overreact. So those pause buttons that we were talking about, making sure that we're responding rather than reacting to that behavior. And then considering what we want our children to learn in that moment. What is it that they need to do better at? What is it that they need help with? What skills might they need? Because often behavior is like, hitting, for example, can be because of frustration and they're feeling overwhelmed or they're feeling angry or they're feeling hurt. So those feelings can really overpower their ability to behave well. Yeah. And the lying, they might be afraid. So it's often emotional irregulation that causes this kind of behavior. And so actually looking beyond the behavior to what skills you need to teach them. And when they are emotionally dysregulated, that's not the time.
Yeah.
It's really tempting to want to sort the behavior out in the moment, and especially if you're in public, and especially if they've hit someone or something like that, you feel you need to almost for your own sake and your own sort of embarrassment.
There's a pressure, isn't there? There's a pressure to do something as a parent. But you're so right. Nothing is ever really learned in that moment when they're reactive, and you're reactive. But it's hard to sometimes recognise that and step back.
It is hard. And then it's also, what's also hard is to go back to that incident when things are calm and things are lovely and you're having a nice cuddle and you think, oh, I'm going to ruin the moment if I bring up that behaviour.
Yeah.
But actually those moments of connection are the time that it's good to bring up that behaviour. And you say, when you hit out this morning, and I could see that you were really upset and really hurt about what had happened, but I can't let you hit, so we've got to find a different way. What do you think you could do differently? And kids can often find their own solutions when they're feeling calm and they're feeling connected with you. So it is going back to the moment and just trying to help them learn the things that they need to learn. Maybe it's giving them an alternative. Instead of hitting, you could have stomped your feet because that wouldn't have hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Or you could have come and told me that how frustrated you were feeling or how upset you were.
Yeah.
So it's giving them alternative behaviours as well.
I love that. And you're so right. Sometimes thinking about what it is that you actually want them to learn and take away from this mistake, rather than looking at it as a punishment for getting it wrong. Because really they're just highlighting to us the areas that they need work on and the areas that they need to build skills in. And it's our job to guide them and help them build those skills.
And children want to do well if they can,
Yeah.
So I think that's also worth keeping in mind. They don't want to behave badly.
So true. So how do you think we can build self-esteem and confidence in our children?
Well, I think it goes back to the sort of appreciation and the noticing what is good about them, and highlighting that for them, paying attention to what they do and how they try. We have to, I think, put ourselves in their shoes. What helps us to feel good about ourselves? Constant correction. If someone's constantly correcting you, even if it's the little things like your grammar or walk here instead of there, whatever it is, that feeling of getting it wrong a lot of the time can really erode self-esteem. So I think as parents we have to be very careful about criticism and correction, because too much of it really does erode self-esteem. And to even when a child is behaving, that's what I love about appreciation actually, because even when a child is not behaving well, you can still use appreciation. So you might have told them 100 times not to jump on the sofa, and there they are jumping on the sofa, right? So the temptation is to go in and go, I've told you 100 times. But instead you can go in and you go, I love your energy. It is just brilliant. Jump on the floor and let's dance around and get rid of some of that energy, because you've got bundles of it. So you're appreciating and you're noticing what's good and brilliant about them, and you're redirecting the behavior at the same time. And it helps them to want to do what you're asking them to do. And it also builds that, I do have lots of energy. That's a good thing about me. Yeah. And that builds that self-esteem as well.
Yeah. So I think is it Daniel Siegel that talks a little in some of his books, isn't it, about the connect before we redirect, just as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Tina Payne.
Build that connection
absolutely.
so that we can have that positive influence and guide them in the right direction.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I think as adults, we can recognize that. If someone's telling you off, you want to get defensive, right?
Absolutely.
If someone's saying something lovely about you and then suggesting something else, you're much more able to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, because one puts us in a reactive state right away, doesn't it? It makes you defensive right from the offset, and therefore you're not in a place for learning to take place. Whereas if we keep that connection, we keep them in a more open-minded place to listen to the message.
Totally.
So understanding tantrums is quite a complex thing for us. Can you begin to explain some of the science behind what's actually happening for children so that we can sort of best guide them in the right direction to help them through a tantrum?
Well, the science is pretty complicated, so I think we don't want to go into all the details, but I do think what's useful for parents is that we're dealing with a developing brain. And children's brains are very far, especially in the toddler years, they're very, very far off being fully connected, because that only really happens in the 20s. Now, sometime they're saying it's sometime in almost up to 30. And the connection that takes place last is the connection to the prefrontal cortex. So the ability to think logically and sensibly about things, and also to be able to apply brakes to our emotions. So toddlers are experiencing a lot of brain changes. A huge amount of brain development happens in those toddler years. And they are doing all of that without those kind of emotional brakes in place, because that connection hasn't been made very well yet. It's starting to be made, but it's quite a long way off. So their their limbic system and their amygdala can kind of hijack their ability to think. And I think that's a useful thing for parents to know, that they're not throwing a tantrum because they're being difficult or because there's something wrong with them or whatever it is, but because they are feeling utterly overwhelmed by their emotions. And it's not a comfortable place for them to be. And I think that's quite a useful thing for parents to understand. It's very uncomfortable for us as parents, but it's even more uncomfortable for the toddler that is so overwhelmed by their emotions.
I think a lot of people can see it as manipulative behaviour, can't they? Or certainly the old advice was to ignore it and it will go away. And
sometimes it is a childlike way to manipulate you, and it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing either. I mean, it is a way that they are trying to get what they want and sometimes what they need, and that's okay. But if it is that they're doing it to get what they want, ignoring it isn't going to teach them that that's not how they get what they want. We need to connect with them. We need to hug them. We need to help them through that emotion. And so there are different ways of responding to tantrums, and you do need to know the difference, because there is a difference between absolute meltdown, overstimulated, dysregulated, and I'm going to lie in the toy aisle because maybe, and last time it sort of worked, so if I do it again, it might just this time. Yeah. And of course you respond to those differently.
Are you able to give us any quick examples as to how to respond to each one?
Yeah, so I think it's always about connection. Yeah. It's always about understanding, and it's about empathizing. So when your child is lying in the aisle because they want a toy, it's to go down to their level and just say, I know you really want it. It's really hard when you can't have what you want. I understand that. So you're empathizing and you're going into where they're at, but I can't buy that for you. So how are we going to get through this? Because they're not dysregulated, so they can think, and you can ask them questions like, what are we going to do about this? And that can take them off guard. Oh, I'm being asked. Because sometimes it's just about that control piece, isn't it? So when they're being asked to give a response,
you're so right.
They can
If they come up with their own solution, they're often more willing to follow through on it, aren't they?
Totally. And it can be really, really surprising how able children are to do that.
Yeah.
And how quickly that can flick a switch between feeling like, I never get what I want and I don't have any control in my life and you're just a big meanie, to, oh, actually, you do want to know what I think. You do. Yeah. You are interested in my perspective, and that can really help. If they are totally and utterly dysregulated, the only thing you can really do is try and keep them safe. Until they're able to bring that regulation back. And the hardest piece is that they pick up on our emotions. So if we feel dysregulated in that moment as well, that exacerbates the situation. So it is, as much as you possibly can, and I know it's hell of a hard, to just bring that ease in and bring that deep, the deep breaths, to think my calm helps you calm. And as much as possible to exude that.
Well, we're modelling that behaviour then, aren't we? If you're sat there feeling stressed, but you start taking those deep breaths, they're going to learn that that's what we do in these stressful moments, and that's the sort of behaviour we want to be demonstrating to them.
And sometimes it can help to do that together. So if I know, I'm not sure if you know Mr. Chaz. He's a teacher in America, and he has a great little song that he sings. When I'm feeling mad, I take a breath, and so that kind of thing. You can make up your own song. I mean, it doesn't need to be anyone else's, but actually by singing and breathing, you're helping yourself to regulate, and you're helping your child to regulate, and they won't be able to join in with that song until they're feeling just that little bit better, but they might just be able to take that breath through their tears or whatever, and that can help to calm them down.
And sometimes we're just laying the blueprint for later on in life, aren't we? So they don't have to do it in the moment, but we're helping them understand what to do in this moment. So somewhere along the line, you'll see it come into play.
Totally, yeah.
I love that. Why does it feel like our children don't listen a lot of the time? Like, this is a real big one for lots of parents, isn't it? We feel like we ask and ask and ask, and we just feel like they don't listen to us. What's going on there?
Well, I think we sometimes don't understand how important what they're doing is to them. So play is all absorbing for children. It's how they learn. It's how they regulate their lives. It's how they make sense of the world. And it can seem to us that they're just taking their trains around a train track, but so much will be going on in their heads in that moment. And there will be so much noise in their head about everything that's going on that they don't necessarily hear you. So that's the one thing. If we attempted to yell from another room, we're probably not going to get a great response, because we might hear ourselves loud and clear. They might not have even registered that you're speaking. So I think there is the ensuring that they are actually engaged with you. And then we often say they don't listen, and there's a difference between they don't listen and they don't do what they're told. So it's how we're asking them to do things, and how we're connecting with them first. So again, that note is sitting down next to them or getting down to their level. I know that's common sort of advice that parents are given, but it really does matter. And noticing what they're doing. Oh, those trains are going around the track rather fast, aren't they? What's going on? So they then go, okay, mummy's here, and what has she got to say? And then they can have a moment's conversation with you, and then you've got their attention. And then it's, okay, we've got to go. It's dinner time now. Yeah. So take that train round the track and come to dinner. And compliance will be much more likely to happen when we've made that connection first. And then there's patterns that kids have got into and parents have got into. Say it once, say it twice, say it 3 times, say it 4 times, say it 5 times, scream and yell. So the child is waiting for the scream and yell, because they know they don't really have to listen to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, because that's not the pattern. So it's very hard, but if you can say it once and wait. We need to give our children a bit of time. They don't often think it's a bit like, we expect our children to be a bit like a black cab, and spin round and off they go. But actually, it's more like a tractor on a B road when there's cars backed up and, they've got to maneuver. So those transitions take time, and often just asking and waiting can give them the message that you're not going anywhere. You're not going to be asking them again. There isn't any negotiation happening. You are just going to wait until they're going to do the thing, whatever it is. And the more we talk, sometimes the more overwhelmed they become. So true. I find sometimes if you think about the way you're behaving, if you were to act like that in your adult relationships, what would the difference be? And I know if anyone in my family starts yelling at me from another room, I find that really quite frustrating to listen to. And just as you say, I'm never not doing something. So I just want to finish what I'm doing and then I'll come along. And I find we often have that mutual respect more in an adult relationship if we were talking to our partner like that. But with our children, we do kind of expect to be able to holler from the other room and then to instantly appear. And it's, like you say, if you go and get into their space and engage with what they're doing, get that connection,
then ask the question, stay in their space, and then guide them through to whatever it is you've asked them to do, you are likely to get more cooperation.
And it's tricky because we're time poor.
Yeah.
And to yell from the kitchen is a hell of a lot quicker than going and connecting and da-da-da. But actually we save ourselves time in the long run.
Yeah.
Because half the time you yell from the kitchen, you yell from the kitchen, you yell from the kitchen. Then you go through, then you yell, then they have a meltdown.
So true.
And it all ends up messy. So we can save ourselves time even though it doesn't feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. So another one for you. What should we be teaching our children about competition? So I know obviously the summer's coming up, sports day's coming up, competition. What's some of your best advice for, should we be engaging children in it, or should we be teaching them more to compete against themselves?
Well, I think you can only ever compete against yourself. You can only improve on your own abilities because you can't control anyone else's. So you can have, your Usain Bolt in your preschool. You can only improve on yourself. You're not going to beat that super quick child. I think modeling is really, really important. So how are we modeling competition and comparison in our own lives? Are we comparing ourselves to others in a detrimental and negative way? Are we blaming others for our lack of success? So how are we talking about competition in our own lives? And that will model to our children what's valuable and important to them. I don't think competition itself is a negative, because I think it does help us to see that there are different abilities and different skills, and some kids are good at some things and not so good at other things, and that's okay, because but it does need to be done in a way that we can help our children to improve on themselves.
Yeah.
So noticing the small wins. You were, you got dressed 5 seconds quicker than you did yesterday. Brilliant. That's, whatever it is. And if you see them wanting to compete in a certain area, helping them to do so through practice. Everything, we get better at everything through practice. And sharing your own experiences, I think, can be really valuable.
Yeah.
I felt upset when I, swam a swimming race, and I didn't realize that everyone else was going to be faster than me. I thought I was super fast, and I felt really upset about that. So when we share our experience, they can see, oh, okay, that happened for you too. And then you can say, and you know what, I just decided to get in the pool. I loved swimming, so I got in the pool every time I could, and I swam as fast as I could. And I never won, but I really, really enjoyed getting faster. So you can share your own experiences.
So I guess it's about putting the focus on the progress and the effort, so that they learn that that's where the rewards are going to come from, rather than being focused on the fixed result.
Absolutely. And how good you feel when you improve for yourself, I think, noticing and helping them to notice that.
Yeah.
How do you feel that you went a little bit faster today? Or I don't know, whatever it is they're working at to get better at.
Yeah, I love that. Lovely, Caroline. Thank you so much. I feel like, do you have any last words of advice for our listeners before we come to a close today?
I don't think I don't think there are any specific words of advice, because I think the key is that knowing yourself and knowing your family is what matters. And actually, to your point of competition, I think it can be so easy to look at Instagram and other, even at restaurants where you see families doing certain things, and you think, why don't my children do that? Or why am I not like that? And to actually bring it back to that, to yourself, and to forget about the competition with other people. What do I need to help myself be calmer? And what do I need to connect more deeply with my children? What do I need to look after myself? Those are the questions that are worth answering, not how can I be like that person on Instagram?
So true. So true. Lovely. Well, thank you for joining me on Parent Unplugged today. It's been a pleasure to go through all of this with you. And thank you for coming on.
It's been a pleasure too. Thank you.
Thank you.